the happy feeling I get when I hear that music. The family is all back together again. If you haven't been here for a week, Greg Hughes is back in the house again. Maura Carabello, the stalwart, is always here. So anyhow, I look forward to a great conversation. I feel like last week when you guys were together for the first time, it was sort of like squabbling siblings.
Well, she was super rude.
We just had to...
She was super rude.
I know, there was so much.
Stop. Let's
She
start
started
better.
interrupting me
Let's
all
start
the whole
better.
time.
So anyhow, I'm happy to have you both back in the room. Hopefully you've taken a chill pill. Just kidding. People love your fighting, so I'm glad you're back again. And there's a ton to talk about.
What's this? What are you doing?
I'm looking up something.
It's not like we can't use cheat sheets here.
I'm looking
You can, but you're
up
holding it up
something.
against your face
Because
like
I didn't bring
this.
my glasses. Will you stop judging?
We're all over 40 here. We all have to like move the phone
Recording or
out.
something. I didn't know she was doing.
You thought I was
Oppo
recording
research
you.
or
It's
It's
something.
in the
you know?
wrong
Yeah,
direction.
that's a little narcissistic.
We have a ton to talk about. A lot of what's national is local and what's local is national, but the big announcement that's came out in the last hour on this Thursday afternoon is that the Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is going to be here in Utah on Monday with Lee Zeldin. They're going to be talking about some of the MAHA bills that passed in the Utah legislature, first of its kind bill banning fluoride in the water, also food dyes that were banned from school lunches, and there was one other bill. Now I've forgotten what it was, but there was 3 bills that he's coming to discuss. You seem fired up about this.
Oh, I can't wait. If you told me...
Mara knows RFKJ, so this isn't like woo for her.
RFK Jr., I'm super excited to meet him. But if you told me that Republicans were for cleaner, more natural food, and that the Democrats were burning down their EVs, their Teslas, and burning down the Tesla places, and union workers were excited and voting for the Republican president, I would think that's a fairy tale land that didn't exist. And here we are in 2025, and all those things are the case.
Do you feel like you flip-flopped and all of a sudden you care about the
100%.
environment?
No, I care. Well, I do care about the environment, but I think there is no caring about this environment. Nothing about environmental stewardship whatsoever until Secretary Lee Zeldin and the Environmental Protection Agency goes to Southern California, around San Diego, but particularly over to Mexico, where Tijuana, they've been shoving human sewage into that Pacific Ocean for over 1,000 straight days. It could be up to 10 years. Nobody's done anything about it. The water now in California is now so polluted you can't get in it anywhere. The Navy SEALs can't even train it without getting sick. There is no environmental cause, there's no environmental protection if you don't stop making the Pacific Ocean a porta potty, a toilet. So I am only, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to see Secretary Zeldin, and it's the only thing I'm going to talk about.
I actually read about that.
No agenda. We have no agenda until we stop making the Pacific Ocean a toilet of human feces.
Is Lee Zeldin talking about this, or is it something that's come up in your own conversations?
It's impacted my life personally, and it's because I've been going down to Southern California, and you got these yellow signs. You can't get in the water anywhere. It's and it's disgusting, and it's been forever. And so I'm done. And then
here's something funny. I saw those signs in January, and I researched after I went home, but I thought that the lifeguards just didn't want to get into cold water in January.
So they were like, let's keep them
So
up.
they were like, let's no swimming, and so we were like, whatever. And so we went swimming in the freezing cold water just because if you're at the ocean, that's what you do. My son was surfing. Yeah, I didn't realize it was because of the poop. So it is a problem.
I've seen overhead pictures. And the water flows south, so it's so disgusting that it is so much that it's actually worked its way north up into the Imperial Beach, Coronado's Beach. It's so gross. Anyway, it is getting actually some attention now. And
I think decades ago, California worked on it. I think they had some kind of canal or water system that was diverting it, but now there's just too much poop.
I don't know how we can even talk about this environment in any serious way if that's just going to be allowed to exist, A, and B, get worse. I cannot wait for Secretary.
If you hate that, you should see the ships that we allow. I've never been on a cruise, but apparently, like if you're 3 miles off a coast, the law is that you can dump all the sewage. And 3 miles doesn't seem that far to me. It's just like
that's
bleh.
so gross. I just think that is my new I'm telling you that's.
So
I can't wait for
you're going to stalk Lee Zeldin on Monday and be like, listen, we're talking poop.
You've got a toilet. It's called the Pacific Ocean. Okay. And it shouldn't be a toilet. It should be an ocean that's clean and you should be able to swim in. It's even a national security issue because those Navy SEALs are trained down there, and even they get sick now getting in that disgusting water. It's a crisis, Heidi. It's a crisis. And I'm going to put bright lights around it.
Okay. Are you going to be there or venting about anything on Monday?
Yeah. Here's what I think is interesting about this visit.
And I like clean food.
When Kennedy got
You're
approved a couple months ago, his approval ratings were around 39%.
Yeah.
So that's eating away. He's an interesting brand, right? It's a mixed brand.
He's a
It's
Democrat,
hard to
but all of a sudden
forget.
was
He's a
helped elected by
Republican, and now
Republicans.
suddenly people like Hughes like him. So he's a mixed brand.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting choice that you've got to figure that Kennedy is really into promo right now. And he's using Utah and the work that the legislature did to platform his brand. And I'm not
his
so
issues.
sure his brand.
Is that good
And
PR?
I'm not so sure that that's good PR for the House and Senate. So if I were the House and Senate, I would probably want my own victory lap. There was a good dialogue about what should we use government money for in terms of health. We had 2 or 3 rounds of it here. It was thoughtful consideration. They eliminated some soda, but did some vending. So we had a really good health conversation during the legislative session. I think they came to their own conclusion. And I feel like I've long felt that Utah has always had this habit of anyone who wants to dance with us, we're just so thrilled you can come look at us. We gotta get rid of that. We need some self-esteem. Like I
agree
feel
with
like
you on
Kennedy's
that.
using us a little bit, and he's gonna go take this wherever he wants it to go. Now, hopefully that aligns with the goals of the people in our state, but I'm not so sure it will. So my first reaction from a public relations point of view is, there's a chance that Utah gets used and that we end up being either a laughing stock or an echo chamber. So to that I mean that if you're opposed to anything Kennedy's doing, you roll your eyes and go, look at crazy red state Utah again. I don't like when we're used that way. But I equally don't like when we're used by what I see as the far right, who's just talking to themselves. They're not actually trying.
Yeah.
But so it'll be interesting. I don't know if I think more highly of ourselves, and I don't think we needed Secretary Kennedy to come in and take a victory lap for us.
I'm so excited for him to come. And I agree that this is a needy state. And I saw it when Sundance left. Everybody was they felt like they were, I guess there was some, I don't know, self-affirmation having this Sundance festival here that people were so sad that it was leaving. I didn't care. So I agree with you about the point about this neediness for some reason.
I think businesses that make their money off them.
Here's where, you asked me, Heidi, if my positions have changed. Here's where I've come along now at this point in my life and paying attention, or I thought I was, to politics for as long as I have. I find the lobbyists and the special interests, whether it's we're talking foreign wars and engagement and military-industrial complex, where the tail starts to wag the dog. I feel that more today than I ever did before. Now we look at FDA, we look at our food. There's a lot of lobbyists out there trying to push for your candy and your soda pop and all these things. You should be able to use it with your your welfare benefits. And I find, and what I heard from RFK Jr., which resonated with me, is things that other parts of this world do not allow in their food and in their food supply, this country does allow. And then he pointed to a disproportionate influence in the lobby that goes on in D.C. And I am more cynical today of the lobbying of the people that are supposed to be administering or governing or watching over certain things, even the DEA, and then magically becoming the well-paid attorneys for the very people they were supposed to regulate or oversee. It happens so much, and I'm probably I'm just more cynical today. And so when RFK says we're going to look at some of this stuff, we're going to pay for more scientists and less bureaucrats, we're going to do something. I like that. I think all that makes sense. You look at pictures, Maura, of Americans back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Everybody wasn't just as unhealthy as we are today. What's going on? Something is going on.
A lot has changed, yeah.
So I like the questions. I like pushing on some of these things. I want to see moneyed influence be less of the driving factor.
So I'm going to take
for
a
all
spin
of
off
government.
of Greg and say, absolutely, Utah is right for lobbying reform. We have led and ran amok on unchecked lobbying access, and so I would love to.
Are
see
you switching
Utah.
the subject to me?
Yeah.
Are we not
I said
talking about
I'm going to run-
MAHA?
we
She's
did.
baiting and switching
No,
here.
no, I'm not baiting him. He agrees with this. We are
Yeah.
ready for lobbying reform in Utah. You had just done 2 rounds. I think
Okay.
you
Yeah.
did it well. I was not
Yeah,
arguing
well.
with you. But your premise,
Yeah.
you were using it, but your premise
I'm
was lobbying
cynical.
reform.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm
And
cynical.
I do think Utah, if we are going to do something, instead of inviting Kennedy, why don't we
But do you
lobbying
think,
reform?
and this is a serious question, not argumentative, Do you think that the environment in Utah is the same as Washington, D.C.?
On what? I mean,
Like on lobbying, you mean?
Yes.
well,
I think
but
that
I
could
you
not have a lower
compulsive
opinion
need to
of-
compare. And
Not
I don't
compulsive
need
need,
to.
I'm just saying
I
that-
don't need to compare.
No,
I can
sometimes I wanna say glass
so
half
the
full versus-
reform that I would do in Utah is not the reform I would do in DC. It's not the reform I would do in Iowa. But I am just saying, in the state of Utah, there's need for lobbying reform.
I do, but I would say it's just at a smaller scale. I think K Street is running the world, not just the country anymore in DC, and I don't know that it has that
I
disproportionate
thought Elon Musk was running the
disproportionate
world.
of an influence.
I think he's running out of
No,
time.
I know Democrats want to say that's the
non-cabinet
case, but
members who are billionaires were running the world.
no, that well.
And it's the same
You
thing.
mean
We're
the-
both saying money.
You mean the 4 or 5 billionaires that gave to
Money
the
wins the
Wisconsin
day.
race? for the
We are going to
Democrat?
talk about that. Let's
Yeah,
talk about
money
Elon
wins
Musk
the
for a
day in
second, but
America.
I'll let you guys know if I get an interview because I'm putting in a request to Speaker Schultz to see if I can sit down with RFKJ because I have a lot of questions for him. I'd be interested to hear what some of his answers are. But Musk did put a lot of money into that Wisconsin judicial race. A lot of people are talking about him, that he might possibly be out of the good graces of the Trump administration, but I think he went into this job with, I forget what the title is, with some kind of special title, where I think you're only allowed to hold that for 130 days. So technically, I don't think he has forever to keep doing what he's doing. So how long he sticks around for is hard to say. Maura, does this show that Musk can't buy anything he wants by the loss in Wisconsin?
So these
Or did someone
handful-
else buy it? There was a lot of money. I
So
think the
these-
most ever in that race.
The handful of races, the Florida races and the Wisconsin races, I would say were a win for Democrats. The context there is, in the scheme of things, they're meaningless. So, like, if you're viewing day to day as politics as day to day, give them a win on Tuesday. But then it always begs the question of, oh, does this signify a change? No. Now,
Well, if you ask
winning is-
MSNBC, the tides have turned.
Right, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm
I
saying
don't
that
think that.
sort of analysis is because you have to fill 24 hours of news. And so, was it a win? I think Democrats had their first good week in a very long time. I don't think a week of wins changes things, but I also don't want to say that it wasn't a win for the Democrats. I think the narrowness of the victories in really red districts in Florida were good. Like, you have to look at that and go, okay, I feel good about that. And then I really think the Wisconsin race. Now, here's the bad news. Yet again, America set a precedent of spending that much money.
So much money.
And, but I think for as branded as that was. Now, I'll also, for perspective, remind us all that Trump has never had really good coattails. He didn't do well in 18, and yet he still managed to win a lot of what he wanted to win. So I do think it's a good week for Democrats. I do think they have to be happy, but a good week does not make a C-note change.
I know, and you can comment on that, but like I was reading a few articles today that are coming out about, I think there's 3 or 4 books coming out on the Biden administration in the next few weeks. Oof, if you've read those, it's not a good week for Democrats because the people who were closest to Trump and protecting him are now coming out and telling the stories about how he wasn't really put together and shouldn't have been president, and I'm like, ooh.
Trump?
The details.
No.
Not Trump, Biden. Did I
Biden.
say Trump? Yeah. Former President Biden, his former chief of staff said that he thought that at some point when they were getting ready for the debates, that maybe he thought that instead of the president of the United States, he thought he was president of NATO. And I'm like, ooh.
The only thing that rubs me wrong is I see a lot of that now where people even like Jake Tapper and everybody just saying, why was this allowed? They all empowered it. They all were part of it. They can act like they didn't know anything and now they're, I don't know
You're
what
talking
their
about Biden?
excuse. Well, yeah, anybody around Biden wants to
Okay, no, I'm
criticize him
just checking
today.
on yours. No.
Yeah, anybody that's criticizing Biden today, that was around him, was in his universe, was either covering him as a member of the media or was on his staff back then, who has a critical word to say now, all I'd ask is where in the world were you when you were on the clock and all this was going on? Don't act like you're surprised by any of this.
Keeping their jobs, homie.
I guess, but-
So let's talk about these elections for a second. So Maura says it's a win for
Yeah,
Democrats
it's-
this week. Is there any good news for Republicans?
Well-
Is this bad news coming up for the midterms that they're all going to eat rocks and that's it?
So I think that there was some enthusiasm with Democrats. They wouldn't have they outspent the Republican candidates in Florida and those in the special election races and in the Wisconsin race. They way overspent the Republican candidates and for as much money as they put into those Florida races, the candidate that was running to take I think Lee Zeldin's place, Fines, was a Republican. He's, as Governor DeSantis calls, a squish. He's not strong on Second Amendment. He's not strong on some of the kind of the red conservative issues. Because he was a state senator in the Florida state senate, and so he didn't have a ton of enthusiasm, and there was a ton of money put in for the Democrat candidate. So I think holding on to that narrow margin and winning all those seats that the Democrats didn't just give or concede. They put real money in there and really tried to win. When the big win for the Democrats is they only lost by 15 points instead of 30 points, I guess you can say that's a win. But I think an April race is going to have a low turnout. I think that Trump voters I think Trump doesn't have long coattails because I think people get out to vote for him, liking him, but not really identifying strongly with politics in general or candidates individually. So I don't think he has long coattails. I think a 15-point percentage win is a win for the Republican in an April race that's going to have a low turnout and as much money as the Democrats put in. Go over to Wisconsin, 80% of the money for the Democrat Supreme Court Justice candidate, 80% of that money came from out of state. More billionaires gave to a higher amount of money than Elon Musk gave to the Republican Attorney General running in that race. But if you read the headlines, you'd think that Elon Musk tried to buy that race. He put the most money in. You put J.B. Pritzker, you put George Soros, you put the woman Jurgensen, she's another billionaire. There's about 4 of them that put in a little over $30 million into that race between them. I think that race, I think everyone was worried that Trump voters wouldn't come out in the same way they had for the presidential election, and Democrats have done their job to keep it. What they did in Wisconsin, it's a state judicial races, they held serve. They didn't gain a seat in the state Supreme Court, but they kept that 4-3 majority. So that is a win for them per se. But I would be very hesitant to say that all of our politics going forward from here have been dictated by all the Democrats won because they only lost by 15 points in a heavily Republican area in Florida, and they won because they held the seat that they had in Wisconsin. I think that the April races on April 1st are, they are what they are.
And I love Greg's analysis, and I loved DeSantis's analysis. It really echoes the excuses that Democrats made that made them fail for the last 2 cycles. So they're over-explaining, they're lowering expectations. The problem is they have a commander-in-chief who only elevates expectations. And so they won't start syncing up. They're already starting to make excuses. Like all of this analysis, I would say the Democrats put forth a pretty good effort to get better at block and tackle, which they used to excel at in the 80s and 90s. So I think this kind of analysis is not disheartening to me. It's over-explaining, it's lowering expectations.
Mara's eating it up.
I'm totally fine with that,
and
I will take the numbers because I think that if
you would take every loss by 15 points if you were thought
I'll take
to lose
those
by
2
30.
districts. I'll take the advantages, and I'll take the demographic take on that, and
Well,
I will take
I still think
DeSantis
that- I think
excusing
that-
poor
I think
performance.
the
I think
Republicans
those are
will-
good things.
I think
Any
the Republicans
operative
will
would
take
take
the win.
DeSantis's analysis of those races.
I think he has a personal animosity.
He
Governor
does.
DeSantis
And
does
he
towards
makes
that guy.
excuses and he's
'Cause
whiny.
it's-
So I
don't
love
think that's
those
trying to
races.
justify a movement
He is
in his state.
justifying.
I think he doesn't like that guy.
And I think there's so much time before the midterms. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that we're going to be looking at, the midterms that we are looking at in November is, what can we afford? How much are we paying out from our families right now? What are our taxes doing? What are tariffs doing? And I think the bottom line of inflation and how much eggs cost and the basics that I think were a big talker in the November election are going to be a big issue. And so the big question is, what are the tariffs going to do? Are they going to make things more affordable for Americans and Utahns, or are they going to make things worse? And I guess it depends on who you ask. So we should put on the table here that none of us are tariff experts. I think everyone online right now, though, believes they're an expert in tariffs. I read a lot, and I'm still trying to, figure out what it means. But yesterday, President Trump rolled out his tariffs. He was pretty excited on Wednesday, calling it Liberation Day, making America wealthy again. He announced a 25% tariff would go into effect at midnight on all foreign-made automobiles. He also said in the Rose Garden that he would announce new tariffs of 34% on imports from China. That's on top of, I think, 20% that's already there, so close to 55%. European Union goods will be 20%, and then just across the board, about 10% on everything. I think a lot of people are worried about what this means for their bottom line. We're seeing that reflected in the stock market that's taken a hit. Maura, where do you see this big picture? Is this something that we just have to let it go for a little while to see if the tariffs work, or is this just a bad idea?
So I might start international and then go local.
Okay.
I think they're totally different discussions. I think the world, and I'm going to be, we won't go in depth on it, I don't think we have the time, but I think the world generally responded in two different ways. One, we're seeing our allies sort of take at America in a way we haven't seen in the modern age. But they also were measured. They, everyone has learned that with Trump, everything's a game, nothing is fixed, which doesn't help for the economy, but it helps with negotiation. And so they responded by sort of being measured and saying, well, let's see, because everything with Trump is a negotiation. So I think the world responded poorly. You saw that, as you said, in the Japanese. You saw that in all the economic measures. And that's an emotional response. And I think that the international community, from my seat, we've lost some footing. We've certainly lost credibility. But they have given us some room there to negotiate the economy. Locally, it's just what you said. So Trump won on the economy. He won on how much it was costing you to live every month. And I don't see a version in which, in the short run, people will get anything for less money. Now, the Republicans are going to start teaching you that you should not look in the short run, that you need to look in the long
game
run.
Yeah.
Well, let's see how successful they are. That's not traditionally how Americans respond to things. We are very impulsive. We respond to our now. We don't respond to our general. The other thing that Trump's really pulling a bait and switch on is how innovative and novel he is, how we have, this is all new, he's reinventing the system. No, I mean, 1930s Smoot-Hawley was exactly this. I mean, it wasn't kind of this, it was exactly this. And what we found, and they did this with a flailing economy, they put this into place, 67% of imports stopped that following year, and we went deeper into the Great Depression. So, I mean, the good news is, I think, well, the good bad news is you'll know whether this is working. Tariffs are taxes, and they are taxes that we will pay, and we should expect to. Greg and I were just on a phone call, and someone was telling us that they had a large purchase. It was a boat, and it was $350,000 for the boat. And he had ordered it a while ago, and the guy who was importing it for him told him that if this boat showed up today, he was fine. If the boat showed up tomorrow, he would have to pay $100,000 more in taxes. Oof. So that's on a $350,000 purchase, he would have to pay $100,000 more in taxes. And that was real for him. And so, you know, if you're going to buy a car, so the question
Party
will
on his
be,
boat, though. Who is this? Can we go to his house?
Exactly. Can the Republican, can the president, because it'll be really interesting to see if Congress holds rank, but can the president persuade you that even though the next few months might feel heavier, might be more expensive, can he talk you into saying, well, this is all in the long run? I don't think you can. I don't think there's any way that in the short run this doesn't bring up prices.
I think he needs to sell. We've talked about this before. Sorry, Greg, you're next here. But we've talked about on a local level that in the past the governor or the legislature hasn't taken the opportunity to sell the people of Utah on why something mattered or why they needed to do that. And while I think President Trump was excited to roll out his tariffs and he wanted people to understand, I think that for the average American, tariffs aren't something we think about. And I think he needs to really lay out his plan of this is my big picture and this is what I hope will happen in this many years or this many months, and it may hurt for a while. But I think unless you lay it out with an explanation, I think it just frustrates people, most people who aren't really into the economics of how the world works.
But what's tricky about this is the foundation of his pitch to the people. The foundation was, Biden, man, he's making you pay so much more, and I will bring you economic relief.
Yeah, it's true. And I'll
when,
tell you
Greg, when?
I'll tell you different than Smoot-Hawley. I'll tell you what this country looks different than them. And I've never been for protectionist tariffs, and I'm still not.
But these are, though, don't you think?
No, I don't. If you look at what we charge in tariffs, or what he's doing here versus the tariffs that we're being charged, or the prohibitions we have to send our goods around the world, it's not protectionist at all. What this is that America has been hollowed out of its manufacturing, its factories, its jobs. We have great cheap socks from big box retailers. We are 100% dependent on the imports that come into this country. We cannot make our own medicine. We don't have an ability to produce anything. And if we do, like our ranchers, they can't sell one single steak in the country of Australia, while Australia sends $39 billion of beef into our country. There has been, under this concept of free trade, which I've been asleep at the wheel, it's a one-way street. We are the piggy bank for this world, militarily and otherwise, but we are the consumers. We are the consumers for the world. They send everything here. We make nothing. We are able to export nothing. I do not know how we think it is sustainable to not have factories, to not have industry, to need everything from a global supply chain that is proven through COVID and other unexpected moments to be wholly untrustworthy. It can be jammed up. It's frail. We have to start seeing those factories. In the 11 weeks that Trump has been president, there's been over $1.5 trillion of committed investment in the United States. Biden didn't have $1.5 trillion in 4 years of committed outside. We're going to build.
Do you know that, or
we're
is that
going to build.
hyperbole?
No. This is real. I saw the charts. If you want me to get on my phone, I will give you the line item of each company. Honda's making their cars in Indiana now instead of Mexico. I can go through the 1.5 trillion. I can show you the amount that Biden had. I'm telling you right now, what I hope happens, because for some reason tariffs work famously for every other country. So if GM wants to sell a car in China, which has 300 million in their middle class, that's their buying class, we can't send anything over there. But if you want to build your factory, GM, and build Cadillacs in China, you can, and they do. Okay.
I would like to be able to buy an iPhone not made by Uyghurs or slave labor at some point.
I would like to see industry and jobs. This country has been literally hollowed out. I can rattle off Sylvania. I can rattle off so many businesses that existed where I grew up in Southwest Pennsylvania that don't exist at all anymore because we make nothing. We need all of our chips from Taiwan. 96% of our rare minerals are either extracted and processed in China. That's not a good sign. And we have rare minerals in the U.S., we just don't extract them here. There is no way we can continue to be a nation of consumers with nothing that we build, manufacture, or are able to export. This is something that had to be changed. It's a hard reset. It takes a lot of guts to do it. There's not a lot of leaders that would even talk about it, let alone do it. President Trump's going to do it. And I think that this long game is not going to be that long. I think it's going to be, let me tell you, that transitory inflation that Biden used to say we had, that we all lived through for 4 years, that wasn't transitory, we didn't have this discussion of what was coming up. We had denials that it even existed, that if you didn't like what you were paying at the grocery store, you had money dysmorphia because you didn't know how good it was. Thomas Friedman from the Times would tell you, we've never had a better economy, ever, while people were suffering in real time. We're talking about this, and we should, but the Democrats and Biden never talked about what they were doing to the American people and the time they were doing it. At least we should understand and will understand that when we transition to a country that makes things, that can manufacture things, that can export goods, our economy is going to be far stronger.
So first, Biden, we were super lucky that Biden was our president because he landed a soft post-COVID landing in a way that none of us expected. Whether you were conservative or liberal in your ideology for economy, every economist agreed that we came out of COVID as good as we could, and that was because of the decisions that Biden was making. It's interesting to me, if you are being incredibly sanguine about Greg's protectionist worldview, you would see that manufacturing would at best come on for 5 years from now. At best, if you started building today, now remember, the cost in of goods and services, the capitalization is going to be plus 30, plus 40. We're doing some capitalized projects right now in Utah, and our accelerator rate is over 30%. That is unconscionable, and it is because of the tariffs. And these are conversations that I'm having in boardrooms right now saying, okay, you want to build this structure in 3 years, how should we build in construction acceleration? So while Greg is waiting for this utopia bringing manufacturing back, even though the free market in America didn't want it and the consumers in America didn't want it, but at best, those manufacturing jobs and those manufacturing facilities at best will show up in 5 years. So
is it worth it because he's playing long game?
Between now and 5 years from now, you are going to suffer like we haven't seen since the Great Depression, but hang in there because philosophically we'll be bringing low to mid-page manufacturing jobs back to the United States.
Apple announced $500 billion investment in the U.S. manufacturing.
Yeah, no, you said what you said, Greg. I heard you.
You don't split. You're saying that $500 billion comes on the 5th year? There's nothing invested before then?
Capitalization and growth of building manufacturing that doesn't exist. You've built projects before. You think you can tilt up a factory in less than 5 years? You think you can capitalize, fund, and build it?
Maybe in Detroit, some of the car factories that have kind of gone
No,
silent.
Yeah,
You
can't
they've
do that.
already stated this.
Yeah.
The ones who
But
are
it's
even
not-
in favor of Trump
Well,
are
then
saying,
what?
hey,
Never
this
have
is
another
how we're
factory
going
in
to
here?
tackle.
If
Or
you have
maybe
Lilly-
we
if
don't
you
do
have
all
Eli
or
Lilly
nothing.
Company
Greg,
wanting
I didn't
27
interrupt
billion.
you. I'm telling you, I just think
But-
this absolutely is protectionist.
what's-
And it serves no greater good than making big companies bigger. It totally destroys what is special about America, which is small and mid-sized companies who are doing okay. Because we're taking
They're
away
not.
the
No,
goods
they're
and
not.
services that they used to be provided from the federal government with the Doge cuts. And then we're also adding on top of to it an inflationary global tariff. And we're alienating our best trading partners. And the other thing is we keep
been a one-way
acting
street.
like Trump is being novel. This is a road that he's traveling down. We have seen this over and over. It almost is always in fascist regimes, and it is almost always consolidating wealth and power, and it always leads with tariffs. Like, it's not novel. So when we ask, but the bigger question, Heidi, is how do people vote and think and get scared? They do that month to month when they can and cannot pay their bills.
Yeah.
And there's no version where in 6 months I see us doing better than we are today.
I think some of these tariffs won't even be, I think they're there, but I think you're going to see, as we talked about before, a lot of negotiation happen where you're going to see reciprocal tariffs where, again, it's a two-way street. You allow us to export into your country, and you tariff us at the same percentage or same amount that we tariff you when you come in. And they're doing that not by just hard number being the same percentage, but by the trade gap. So they're trying to make it so that they keep those percentages so that trade deficit that's happening, they can overcome it. What I think you're going to see, and I think you mentioned this too, there's two ways to handle President Trump. You can say, okay, we're going to try and punish you and make you wish you didn't do it, or you can call them up and you can say, all right, we'll lower our tariffs, and you can have access to our economies and our consumers. You do that way, and I think a lot of these tariffs, you won't see that last very long at all.
Yeah,
I think
so
you'll see
if we can
a
sit
healthier
by-
trade environment because of it.
We can sit by and listen to a man who was born with a gold spoon in his mouth and doesn't know how to work a hard day and make ends meet, and let him plan ours. Or you can sit with my current client base who's having everyday conversations in Utah, and they are worried about the acceleration of basic steel, basic wood, basic costs. No one's going to buy a car. Our car dealers are currently in a panic in Utah.
Domestic
because
cars?
starting tomorrow, they will have on their lot a handful of cars that costed one price, and now we're plus 25% on the cars you're going to buy next
Do you know
week.
who's going to benefit
so
from that?
that's today.
Ford, Chevy, GM,
That's today's
Chrysler.
problem. You know who's
That's
not
gonna
going
be
to,
great. It's
to,
gonna be
to
larger
benefit from
market
that?
share.
The Smiths, the Jones, the Jensens.
Imagine the
people once
the
again.
workers that build those
I'm just
cars when
telling
they
you,
can buy more of them because
you
more
may
of them
want
are
to
being
make
sold.
you may want to make government great again, but what MAGA lacks is making people great.
Oh my gosh, you're
so
telling
I'm just
me.
telling you this is going to hurt
You're telling
mom
me
and pop.
that if more Fords and Chevys and GMs that are built in the United States and the middle class are being hired to make them, that isn't a good thing for this country?
Don't get to lecture the Democrats who have been supporting
They have abandoned
manufacturing
the middle
of
class.
cars
Are you
for
kidding me?
years, because the Republicans
You guys
sure
left the
hasn't
middle
done
class
that.
long ago.
No, and what you're seeing
This
right
trade
now
war has been
is
a trade
Trump,
war against the
who
middle
has
class
always lived in
for
a philosophical
decades.
world, continuing
Nope.
to now play Monopoly, except the bummer is
stop.
it's our tax
If you
dollars.
could show me those areas that used to have jobs, they're all gone, Mara. They're ghost towns. That didn't happen because we had a healthy trade environment. That didn't happen because Democrats were
Carte
protecting the middle
blanche.
class.
I mean, do you
It
know
happened
we
because
tariffed a country-
There's been a trade war
we
of which we've
tariffed
never
a
been a part
territory-
of. We've been the victim of it.
We tariffed a territory that doesn't manufacture anything. This is not thoughtful, considerate policy.
Yes,
this
it is.
a man who has never had to deal with a budget, playing with fake money, and
He's
the
been in the
problem is
business
the
sector.
money
Joe
is-
Biden has been a public servant since
He has
1974.
failed.
Since
He's a failed
1974,
ben-
he didn't have he never had a paycheck.
Greg,
for
I
since
know you're
74,
on Trump's
and
hype
I'm saying,
squad,
no,
but Trump is not
You're
a
saying that
successful.
if Trump is disconnected as a businessman, but somehow President Biden, who got into elective office in '74,
You love
knew
comparative
anything about this
politics.
economy?
You love bait and switch. I get
It's
that.
not a bait and
But I'm
switch.
talking to you about who President Trump is
It's
and
not a
what
bait
his
and
approach
switch.
is to tariffs.
If you
I feel
are-
like
if
we're
you're
approaching
saying-
that Seinfeld
I know.
conversation
No, no.
where-
if you think, but I got.
Do you remember Art Vandelay Industries,
Okay.
importer,
If-
exporter?
If Trump doesn't know his head from a hole in the ground because he's been born with a golden spoon, but he's been a businessman. He's not ever been in elected politics prior to being president. But you can then turn around and say that your Democrats who've have not been businessmen any time in the last 40 years somehow
Every Democrat
created
isn't
this
a
soft
business
landing
person?
for COVID and knew how to handle the
They
economy.
did. The Biden
I'm sorry, you
administration
can't
handled
take someone who
COVID.
has more business experience and dismiss all of it and point to a guy that hasn't been in business
Greg,
in
you
his
do
adult
that all
life
the time.
and say he knows what he's doing. You can say that, but it doesn't make sense.
Whew, you guys exhausted?
All
All right. Well, we got to dig into one more topic before we wrap it up today. There were some numbers that came out last week that we didn't have time to dig into that we're looking at. What are you looking at, Greg? What do you want to
He's
talk
still
about?
selling something.
You're selling something?
She's saying I was just making up facts. I was sure.
Oh, you've got facts. Greg comes prepared now. He used to just wing it. Now
Greg comes totally
he
back.
comes with his numbers and ready to go.
I came with a little bit.
So here in the great state of Utah, in the next couple of months, there's going to be some fights, some inter-party wars going on, trying to figure out who the leadership is. Are we the party of MAGA and Trump and Republicans, or is it going to be more centrist? For Democrats, are you going to be the party? Are we going to be the party of Bernie, or are we going to be more centrist? And there were some poll numbers that came out that looked at some of our elected leadership and some former, I think the polling was done at the end of March. This was the Utah Public Opinion Pulse. And it was kind of interesting looking at these numbers because we're trying to figure out, which way is the Republican Party in Utah going. We know that new leadership will be elected. We have Rob Axon, who's been leading the Utah GOP as the chair. Phil Lyman, who lost the governor's race, is looking to run against him. Looking at the governor's numbers, first off, Governor Spencer Cox had some interesting numbers because among party-first Republicans, he had good favorability, but even among Trump-first Republicans, which I would think are probably not as loyal to the governor because he kind of takes a centrist, maybe one leg on either side of the fence approach oftentimes, still get 63% approval from that group. Greg, are you surprised by some of these numbers? Is what you expect because it's a big tent for Republicans in Utah?
I want to keep this to the data and not try to be a honk for for candidates.
Yes, please no honking.
I just want to say this. I don't know what a Trump Republican is. Is that someone who would not have identified as a Republican if not for Donald Trump? Because I think there's a lot of people that have gotten more involved, have been willing to vote for Trump.
I think there are some voters that never voted until Trump got into the mix.
Is that a Trump, or is it someone who sees Trump as the leader of the party? Because I would call myself a Republican first, Trump second, but I'm clearly very supportive of Trump. But I've always been. I'll be a Republican. I was a Republican before Trump ran for office. I'll be a Republican after he's
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I don't know what that necessarily means. But if I take the Trump first and the Republican first, whatever it is, I think the largest voting demographic in Utah still are Republicans. When I look at the net advantage or plus for all the candidates as Republicans, I don't see the problem. I see a very popular Trump at a plus 53% amongst Republicans. I see Spencer Cox at a plus 33. I see John Curtis at a plus 44. I see a Mike Lee favorable at a plus 41. And
so Curtis actually has the highest plus favorabilities, which is interesting.
amongst Republicans. And,
Yeah.
and then when you get to Romney,
It
it's
wasn't
what you would
amongst,
think.
it was actually overall.
It was like
Yeah.
plus six, only plus six amongst Republicans. And I'm just looking at the Republican line right now.
Democrats loved him,
So,
though.
Yeah, and so then you'll see a combination of different types, but you go down to neither a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. Those numbers change by each candidate.
Yeah.
But if you look at all the Republicans that are elected in the state of Utah, Republicans being the largest voting bloc, I don't see that the Republican Party has any trouble at all. I think it's an embarrassment of riches being a Republican.
Yeah, I don't think the poll was asserting that Republicans were having problems.
Well,
I think
it has an identity crisis, but
I think they are. I think we're talking about what kind of Republican do you have to be? And I think where Utah is really unique is we have a broad spectrum of equal Republicans who are very different than each other, and that has made us an anomaly. I do think you've seen the data shows that unaffiliated.
You don't think that's normal across the country?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's normal at all.
Interesting.
Partly because, as Greg suggested, this polling continues to say, hey, listen, Democrats, you're going to have to do some more preparatory work. You're not going to win statewide. So it is a Republican voting state. I think we overuse the term Republican. I think there are many people who see themselves as traditional Utahns. That usually includes the word conservative or
yeah.
moderate conservative,
Right,
things
or
like
center.
that. Whatever you use to say that. I do think you saw a huge spur about 10 years ago, maybe it's lessened a little bit, of people who didn't want to do Republican Party politics anymore. And that wasn't, I'm not bashing the ideology, the bare-knuckled nature of partisan politics was too much for them. So we do have a strong unaffiliated voter. Now, as Greg has suggested in the past, an unaffiliated voter is an interesting conservative because they've taken themselves out of Republican primaries. They've sort of said, you know, I might be a conservative, and if you talk to me, I will check all the boxes that conservatives do, and I may even check all the boxes the Republicans do, but I don't like partisan politics enough that I'm going to take myself out of the primary races and I'm just going to vote in the general election. That makes Utah people who are right of center interesting, because, and I think that's what they're saying, you could be elected here as a moderate. In fact, John Curtis is a really good example. Most of the people running against Curtis ran to the right of him, and he wins. Mike Lee, ain't nobody to the right of him, and he's winning. And importantly, not only are these two winning, their likability numbers are high, and those aren't the same thing. So we like Mike Lee. We like him as a firebrand. But wait, we equally like our junior senator, who is carving himself as a moderate and an across-the-aisle guy. Now, Cox is interesting because he is keeping a foot in both camps. I think that's a little trickier.
Yeah.
And we are performing for Trump. And what's interesting about a Republican performance for Trump is 2016, man, it was ugly. Like, we hated him. No, we're not seeing those numbers.
Yeah,
anymore.
Senator Mike Lee
We're pretty
campaigned against
strongly
him.
behind
This is
Trump.
yes.
It's
so
interesting.
So this is what's fascinating about this. So the trend lines are like this: Republicans, Governor Cox plus 33%. Then though, you go to the more conservative Mike Lee at plus 41%. Who goes higher than him? John Curtis with Republicans at a plus 44. Okay, but now if we're saying that this is really, really good numbers for John Curtis, let's go over to Donald Trump. He's at a plus 53. So whatever we're going to say about the favorability amongst Republicans and how well John Curtis is doing at 44%, which is higher than 33% for Governor Cox, higher than 41% amongst Republicans for Mike Lee, you've got Donald Trump over here at 53% plus.
That was before he taxed us with tariffs. So call us next week.
Isn't that interesting? And I don't know that that's the lead. I think that little data point has been buried somewhere in some of these stories, but I think it shows that he is clearly amongst those that are Republicans or identifying as Republicans, the most popular elected official in our state.
Now, if we layer on a level of block and tackle technical politic, because that's where a listener is, what's interesting about these numbers are it's really important to know how everyone does. I think it's at one point really interesting to know what Utahns think, not what Utah Republicans think, not Utah.
Yep.
So these are what Republicans think. Now you get to you and I, Greg, and let's say we're looking at these numbers because we have a candidate who wants to run.
But can I put one caveat in, just slip one caveat in there before you do that? The only reason that demographic is particularly important is because it's the largest voting bloc, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so keep going.
But I'm just saying, like, these are Utah numbers. I like this.
Yeah.
I will give a shout out to Noble. In their 538 score, they're one of the best pollsters. Their margin of error. So, like, this is solid data. They polled 600 people.
Is that Sean Noble
I'm not
out of
worried,
Arizona?
Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I'm not worried about this data. One thing that becomes interesting is not every voter votes during every election, which now you start saying, well, I look at those numbers and I think this is an interesting public conversation. But routinely, if we were both representing Republican candidates, Greg and I would continually give opposing information, which is what these become so important. So if I am running you as a Republican, I am trying to get you to stake out John Curtis territory. I'm trying to get you to stake out Spencer Cox territory. I'm trying to get you to stake out Mitt Romney. I'm not trying to make them the same person. And Greg is like, how far right can you see? But like, what this poll shows is that's what makes this interesting is general elections are not when races are won in Utah. It's caucus convention, primary election, those eliminate our choices. So I'm just saying, if the headline is all about is the party in a crisis, what I would remind us is how I'm going to start reading these numbers is, well, how would you perform in a primary? Which does not include, to this polling, when he polls in general, he polls for registered Republicans. So if I were going to say, what does this mean to the next guy running for governor or whatever?
I'd say track to the guy that's at plus 53 with Republicans.
I wouldn't, because I would say, no, that's an artificially generalized number. That is not a focused number.
And we should talk about that in another week because we're out of time. Greg Hughes has a full-time job now, so he has to leave us. But I've seen people starting to tweet their lists
Rod and Greg Show.
of who's running. Yes, the Rod and Greg Show.
Radio 105.9, KNRS, everywhere on the iHeartRadio.
Ooh, you just used your radio voice with us. So we got to get on. But I've seen people start to banty around who they think is going to be running for the next race for governor. There's some interesting names in the mix. So we'll be talking about that. We've got plenty of time to dig through this. Today we'll just kind of marinate in our tariff, our tariff juice, yes, and what we know.
Excited.
Yeah, let me know
America's
how
coming
car
back,
shopping
baby.
goes for you. Are you buying a car this weekend?
I would. I
Do
buy
it.
American because
Do
it's
it.
gonna be
If you're gonna
cheaper
do
than
it, sign
everybody else.
quickly.
Tell us how that goes.
I know someone at work here whose lease was up with a Subaru, and they were trying to decide if they do something quickly or wait a few weeks. And I think the price between sign this weekend or sign another weekend is going to be vastly different. So
It is going to be vastly
If you're
different.
buying a Cadillac like me, I think your life is very good. You
There's
got a lot
nothing
going
totally
your-
made
going
to
your
your
way.
point. To your point, those are old brand identities. Those are old,
They're more,
old,
those
antiquated.
are more made in America than
That's
the
an
other
old
cars.
man talking.
Any car made in America and its parts are here, you're gonna pay. You're not gonna pay into the tariffs, and you're gonna want to buy that car because it's gonna be less money.
If
And they're
you-
gonna make
you-
more of them, and the people that build them are gonna have better jobs.
That is
and
so
maybe more
sweet
jobs.
that you think that the steel in your American car is from America.
we can't afford to light cars on fire.
Again,
That's
Maura.
fun. That's fun that you
Make
think your
steel-
American car was
Make
made in
steel
America.
in America great again.
Yeah, well, again, find me a MAGA hat made in America.
with a few Mexican parts. Yeah, I think a lot of parts come from South.
I think MAGA hats are made in America.
They're
I think it probably depends on where you buy them. They're probably a lot made in China.
If you buy the rip-offs.
The MAGA hat you gave me wasn't made in America, Citizen Hughes.
It
That's not
wasn't?
true. That's fake news. I'll look.
All right,
at it.
we're going to double check that and we'll be back with you
I'll
next
correct
week.
the
Thanks
record.
so much for listening. All right, we look forward to that. I'm making notes right now.